What is going on? It is Nate the Game Guy coming back with another video at hand, and today I want to talk to you guys about a controller that you should strongly consider picking up if you've got a Nintendo 64 and really enjoy playing on Nintendo's beloved 90s classic, and that is the Brawler controller from Retro Fighters. Let me tell you, this thing is a game changer. This thing is just a ton of fun to play games with. The first thing I did once I got this baby in the mail was hook it up to my N64, pop in a few classics of mine, and had myself a good time. And let me tell you, this thing certainly delivered in offering an awesome experience with some already great classics from back in the day. Now in this video, I'm not going to do an unboxing, I'm not going to do like a whole in-depth crazy review, but what I am going to do is show you guys and talk a little bit about how this controller is essentially like when playing some of these games on the Nintendo 64. Of course, I will be putting a Amazon link down in the description down below, so you guys can check it out if you think this is the right thing for you. But yeah, I will strongly recommend that you guys check it out. But of course, let's jump right into this video, take a look at some of these games once we pop our Brawler controller in and turn on the N64 right after the intro. Alright, so as mentioned from before, the first thing that I did once I got that wonderful controller in the mail was essentially go over to my N64 library. Of course, with this section of the game room, here are my loose games. And if you have already been a subscriber of mine or a viewer of mine for a while, you already know where some of my complete in-box copies are of my Nintendo 64 library. But the first thing I did once I got the Brawler controller in the mail was I essentially went through a couple games of mine, trying to find something that was, you know, pretty alright to play, right? And I figured that the first game that was really worth playing and checking out was at least starting from the basics with Super Mario 64. Now, with Super Mario 64, I have to say, I really enjoyed how the Brawler controller worked out with this game. You know, I really liked how fluid it felt. You know, when playing on the original Nintendo 64 controller, don't get me wrong, I think it's an absolute classic. Of course, I realize that some people may not like it, but that's okay, we're all entitled to our own opinion. But of course, the one thing that you can't deny was that the Nintendo 64 controller back in its day unfortunately had a big problem when it came to drift, and it is essentially a real issue with the controller today. And what I really like about using the Brawler controller is the controller is very solid. You don't really have to worry about drift too much, so whenever I'm playing some of those games where I'm really intensive on the analog stick, I don't have to worry about that so much. So that might be one thing you may want to consider when picking up this controller. But when playing some Super Mario 64, I was very pleasantly surprised at how well the controller handled when playing that game. Now, of course, the next game that I had to try next after I got the Brawler controller was GoldenEye 007. Of course, GoldenEye is an absolute classic on the Nintendo 64, and for good reason too. Of course, Nintendo 64 wasn't necessarily the best console, at least in my opinion, when it came to first-person shooters with the controller layout. But with the Brawler controller, I did notice that, you know, it did make things a little bit more easier. Of course, you did have a little bit of some flaws here and there, simply just because of, like, you know, how Rare designed GoldenEye to play a certain way with the Nintendo 64 controller. But that's okay. Not all great games are perfect. In my opinion, there is no game ever made that is perfect, but that doesn't necessarily mean that GoldenEye is a bad game just for a few flaws. After all, it is an absolute classic for good reason. But I will say, with the Brawler controller, I really liked how it played with GoldenEye, and I enjoyed how I had this new perspective with going across like the levels and with the camera angles and all that wonderful stuff. It felt more natural and it felt more fluid, and I really appreciated just how the game overall felt when I was playing some GoldenEye with the Brawler controller. Of course, when I was playing on the Nintendo 64, I wanted to switch things up a little bit, but stick to the theme of first-person shooters when trying out my brand new Brawler controller. So I popped in some Turok Dinosaur Hunter, and that was another one that I did enjoy playing with the Brawler controller. I did, like I said, with GoldenEye 007. I did enjoy its new perspective, at least how I felt that the camera angles felt a little bit more enjoyable and fluid with the Brawler controller itself. And after playing some Turok Dinosaur Hunter for a little bit, I have to say I was very pleasantly surprised at how well the controller is. Overall, I do have to say that this controller really felt fluid and solid when it came to playing some of those first-person shooters. After all, the controller is basically to offer a brand new perspective with Nintendo 64 games, just with a more modern layout with the controller design and button layout with the controller itself. So it only makes sense with games such as GoldenEye 007 and Turok Dinosaur Hunter that this was pretty fun playing these games with this new controller. After all, I got that modern experience with some classic titles, and I have to say, I was very pleasantly surprised at how well the controller performed when I was playing some of these games. So if you are somebody that is really into some of these first-person shooters from the Nintendo 64, such as the Turok games and GoldenEye, and some of those other classics as well, that might be one more thing you may want to consider when thinking about the Brawler controller. Now finally, I had to pop this one in with the new controller that I picked up, and that was the original Smash Brothers. Smash Brothers is an absolute classic on the Nintendo 64, and for good reason. Without its success, there probably would have never been a Smash Brothers Ultimate, Melee, Brawl, Smash 4, whatever it may be. Without the success of Smash Brothers on the Nintendo 64, like I said, we may not have some of those other Smash Brothers titles that we got later down the line. But I was very anxious to try the game out with the Brawler controller, simply because if you are familiar with Smash Brothers, you know very well that Smash Brothers is very intensive on the analog stick. Whether you're playing on GameCube, or if you're using the classic controller or the nunchuck on the Wii, if you're playing on the Wii U gamepad, or playing on your Switch, you know very well that you're really going to be putting some force down on those analog sticks, especially when you're trying to do dash attacks and trying to charge up smash moves. It's very intensive on the analog sticks. Of course, with the Nintendo 64 controller, the original, of course, those controllers, as mentioned from before, had some design flaws that were not necessarily good when it came to the long-term use of the controller, and unfortunately, the controller wasn't necessarily great with drift later down the line. Thankfully, with the Brawler controller, I was able to enjoy some Smash Brothers, and I felt like I had just a load of relief taken off of my shoulders. Is just because when I would sometimes hook up the 64 in the past and play with my original controller, I would just be so nervous about causing some unintentional drift or having my controller break one day when I'm just kind of run across like the stages trying to fight off like either Fox or Master Hand when I'm playing through single player or whatever the case may be. But with the Brawler controller, I felt like I had that weight lifted off of my shoulders, and I was able to really enjoy the game pretty well, and I really liked how it held up. After all, with this controller, I feel like it has much more capabilities to avoid some long-term drift, and that really made things a lot more enjoyable when playing Smash Brothers. So I have to say, that was just another great game that I enjoyed playing once I got the Brawler controller hooked up to my Nintendo 64. Alright, and that will conclude the video. What do you guys think? What do you think of some of my thoughts, my footage? What do you guys think of the Brawler controller overall? Do you think this is something that you guys may consider picking up? Do you guys already happen to have a Brawler controller? Feel free to comment in the comment section down below. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. Of course, please do consider giving this video a like. Helps boost it up into the YouTube algorithm so more viewers such as you can find videos just like this. Of course, please do consider subscribing because I post a ton of content when it comes to game collecting, game collecting tips, and other video game related subjects. So if that is something that interests you guys, please do consider subscribing. But if you're going to subscribe, don't forget to hit that bell notification button so that way you will be notified when I upload a video just like this. I hope you guys did enjoy the video. I'll be seeing you guys next time.